Hey everybody, Kyle Buckland here with the Artful Souls. We're in the studio today. I'm going to be working on a landscape demonstration. And this photo was actually chosen via a contest that I had on Facebook where I had my friends and followers vote on their favorite reference photo out of 4 reference photos. So I thought this would be a fun way to engage everybody and get you to have the opportunity to participate a little bit in choosing the reference photo. So we're working with this snowy scene today, and if you've watched the other videos that I've done, the beginner videos, you'll notice that we've added a few extra colors. So this is more along the lines of an intermediate video, but there'll be a lot of stuff in here that'll help you if you're just starting out too. If you haven't watched the beginner videos, I recommend you go back and check those out. Another difference that you'll notice here is that we're going to be starting with a brush. So in the beginner videos we started with shapes on the canvas and we started laying in our big shapes with our paintbrush, but we're going to jump right in with the brush here today. So my colors that I'm using are Rose Madder Deep, Cadmium Red Light, Cadmium Yellow Light, Phthalo Blue, Ultramarine Blue, Burnt Sienna, Yellow Ochre, and Ivory Black, and then Titanium White. And I've also got my mixture, which is 2/3 Gamblin Galkit painting medium mixed with about 1/3 of Gamsol paint thinner. So I mix those together and use that for my medium, which is what I'll be dipping my paintbrush into as we progress here. I also use a little bit of that medium in my white paint, so I put a few drops into my pile of white paint and I mix it up and make the paint a little bit softer. So that's a little trick that you can use. Now if we look at this landscape here, one of the things that drew me to this was the contrast, and also I like the way that a lot of the lines are pointing towards this area in the canvas. So this is going to be our center of interest where these trees come down to this bank. But if you'll notice, there's this nice intersecting of these what you call radiating lines. So this is going to be a radiating line design here. So we have our center of interest, which is going to be right around this area, which is the little light on the bank with the trees there, and then we have all these lines coming in to this area. So almost like a bicycle wheel that has spokes coming out. This is the design that we're dealing with here. We have a little bit of what's called the S-curve design in here too, and then we're going to be incorporating a little bit of the circle as well. So you can see that right off the bat I'm thinking about big shapes. I'm not thinking about painting little branches and reflections. I just want to look at my big shapes. Another thing that we've done is I went ahead and toned my canvas with the ivory black and then wiped that back off to create a nice medium value on the canvas and cover up some of that white. So in this particular photograph we're dealing with a lot of contrast, and we want to be careful when we're judging our values. So and that's how dark or how light an area is. So by toning the canvas, that's going to help us greatly. So I want to jump right in here and draw these trees here on this bank, because these are going to be our center of interest. So I don't want to leave them out. I want to get right at them right in the beginning. A lot of times I'll do that because we're going to be composing our picture around these trees and this little area in the canvas. So I'm using just my regular dark here, which is just an ultramarine blue and a burnt sienna. This is a great dark when you're first learning to paint, because you can adjust it. You can make it a little cooler by adding more ultramarine blue, or a little warmer adding more burnt sienna. I want to get the shape of the creek in. Now in the photograph the creek just goes to the left. I'm going to turn it and have it zigzag back in towards the composition. This is just to create more of this S shape, and also to create this nice flow of our eyes flowing in towards this center of interest piece. Another thing I'm going to do is change the shape of this tree back here. So I want this tree line to come up like this, so that instead of the opposite, which it actually does. So I want it to lead our eye down towards this area of the canvas. Same thing over here. We've got the kind of the distant hillside here, and we want things to be pointing in towards our center of interest. And we have some big trees over here. And I want to start by just laying in some big dark shapes. So same thing we did in the beginner videos with the paper towel. This time we're just going to go in with a paintbrush and do the same thing. So I want to start by laying in the dark shape that's along this creek bank here. And I'm just using my same mixture, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue. I might throw a little yellow ochre into it to give it a little bit more of a greenish color in areas, especially in this creek. But I want to be careful because there's that nice light reflection there, and I want to leave that area because that's going to be one of our lightest areas in the painting, is this little area right in here. So I want to make sure I leave that area and not put any dark there right now. I'm going to go ahead and lay in the shape of this distant tree line here, these pine trees in the back, and then we've got this sort of a ridge right here that runs up, and you'll see that when I do this sometimes I lose some of my original drawing, but that's okay because I can come back and restate it. So a lot of times I'll do that. I'll be coming back right now with my dark again and just sort of popping back in some of this drawing here. So a lot of times it's a push and pull. I'm just using some medium-sized flat bristle brushes here. And I want to try to mix up a nice blue color for these shadows. So I'm using a touch of this phthalo blue and ultramarine blue and mixing just a little bit of that burnt sienna dark in there. The thing about the phthalo blue you have to be really careful with. It's a very powerful color. So if you're following along with these videos, if you're adding that color to your palette now, just be careful and use it sparingly because it'll turn a whole pile of paint blue before you know it. So I want to get a little bit of a blue in here for these shadows. And I'm going to exaggerate the shape of some of these shadows here coming out. This nice dark shadow right here in the foreground. There's a whole little area of shadows over there. I'm going to add a little bit more of this, or a little bit of this rose madder deep to this, and make a nice purple that is very similar in value to my blue that I was just using. So same degree of darkness to it, just a different color, and that's going to create some variation in these shadow tones, create some pretty effects. So this is that bank back there, that snowy bank, and it's got a little bit of light on top that I want to pay attention to when I come back and I start putting in some lighter areas. And you can see how I'm using the direction of the brush stroke to move your eye around the canvas already. Now we've got this nice dark purple tree line back here. It's not as purple looking in the photograph, but I remember the color scheme of this when I was out there taking the reference photo, and that's a great reason to take your own reference photos, because you know a camera can only just be an approximation of the color that's out there, but our eyes can pick up on a lot more subtleties. So if you are gonna work inside in the studio from reference photo, you can do that, but I suggest spending some time outside when you take the reference photo studying your subject matter, and that way you can kind of make some mental notes or even jot some color notes down in a little sketchbook, and then you can use these notes later in the studio. So you see how I'm using the edge of the paintbrush here to do some thinner lines for some of these trees that are back off in the distance. So I've laid in my darks and my shadows. Now one thing, if you've watched the beginner demo videos, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll come back, and I'm going to do that right now, with some darker darks and pick out some areas. So these will be little shadows right along the creek side. and I've just added a touch of ivory black to this. So it's ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and ivory black. And then I'm just going to come back and use this descriptive dark tone to draw some areas that are extra dark here. So these are going to be usually inside your main dark shapes. These can be right at the base of a tree, or a shadow maybe under a rock. Trees in the foreground area, a little darker. There could just be little hints of leaves, or just little areas where this is broken up. Now, what I'm left with is, when I do this, is my light areas, because I've went ahead and laid in my darks. So I've got three main light areas. I've got the sky, I've got this area of sunlight on the snow, and then I've got this beautiful light reflection here in the water. And what I want to do is I want to designate different values to these areas, because I want to make sure that I save my lightest light for this nice reflection. I want it to lead your eye up to these trees, and it's going to help distinguish that from the sky and the snow. So I'm going to say that this is going to be the lightest area. This is going to be the second lightest area, the sky here, and the light on the snow is going to be the third. So I want to work my way up to that light area in the water. So I'm going to start with the snow, and I'm using a little yellow ochre here, and I'm going to go into a little burnt sienna, and then a little bit of this phthalo, because this has a nice coolness to it, the light on the snow, and it's going to make a light that's not too light. And my lightest part of the snow is probably right here, so I want to go ahead and start there. Because that's where my color is going to be the cleanest. Now, the more that I do this, it's going to start picking up some of the gray from my tone, and also some of the blue around it from the other paint that's on there. And so it's going to be getting darker as I go. And I'm going to use that to my advantage to control the value. So there will be subtle differences in the light on the snow here. And there's just some little, I'm going to pay attention to this little descriptive brush strokes that are right along the edge here of the bank. And we've got some areas over here that are light, where the sun is just kind of raking across the bank. And then I want to take a little bit of a smaller brush here, so I've got a smaller round. This is like a number 2 or a number 3 round brush, and I'm going to just pay attention to these little shapes that are out here along this distant bank. So I'm using this light color, but it's nowhere near as light as I could possibly go, because like I said, I want to make sure I'm saving that light, real light tone for the reflection. So I'm working my way up to that light. I don't want to overdo these light spots. It's tempting because a few little spots look good, but I don't want to put too much in there, or it'll confuse the eye. I want to come back and with this smaller brush here into some of these shadow areas. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and pop in some of this lighter color that I'm using for the sky. And the sky had a neat thing. It's hard to see in the reference photo. Sometimes, like I said, the camera just doesn't, you got to give or take a little. I wanted that nice contrast, so I lowered the exposure a little bit, but I lost some of the nice color that's in the sky. So again, I have a knowledge of what was going on there in the sky, and I remember this nice warm tone being right near the horizon. So I want to go ahead and pop that in. And then we had some lighter tones that are up here, just a little bit lighter than what we're using for the light on the snow. And then there's a cloud back there too, so that's going to be some of the, it has some of the similar tones in the cloud that are in the shadows of the snow, so sort of this bluish purple color. So I'm just going to go ahead and brush that in right here. And what we're left with is just enough of a light color to really go in and play up some of this beautiful reflection right here. So I'm going to go into my lemon yellow and make a really nice, or excuse me, my cadmium yellow light and some of this white here, and make a really nice vibrant light reflection here that's going to come up. Now as I draw this down, it's going to mix with some of that tone on the canvas and get a little darker, which is fine because that's what I want. I want the lightest spot to be up near the center of interest. And so I'm painting this light around the shadow of the trees there. So leaving that gray for some of the shadowed areas there. And there's a nice, like a pink, warm tone. It's like a salmon color. That's sort of a transition tone between this light reflection and the shadows. So what I want to do right now, while I'm working on this area, is I'm going to take a smaller round brush, and I want to go ahead and mix up that nice pink color. And I'm exaggerating this color just a little bit, so these are things that you'll learn to do the more you adjust your eyes or train your eyes to see color. This is a beautiful burnt sienna and a little bit of cadmium red light, but I want to make sure that I'm not getting it too light, because I want it to be a nice value between the shadow and the light. So, and I'm doing these little kind of choppy brush strokes here to create some texture in this area and some interest, because these reflections have that a lot, this beautiful way that they're broken up across the water's surface. And again, I'll always keep coming back and sort of restating little areas. So I'm going to come back and redraw some of this bank here. I've actually got some little dark leaves and twigs that come out here in the water, just little spots. And then I want to draw some of this. There's a nice greenish gray in the reflection too. That's what I would think of as like a slate green. So I'm using ivory black, ultramarine blue, a little yellow ochre to get this color. And it's a nice dull green. Almost looks gray, which is what I'm going for. And this is in the shadowed areas of the water here. And now I want to go ahead and pick out some very light areas too. Just this nice cadmium yellow light, and really draw out some sparkles here on the water, because this water has quite a texture to it. It was really moving, creating a lot of ripples. And so just like little commas here, you can see I'm holding the brush stroke a little different, and you can see how I'm holding the brush a little different here, and you can see how the brush strokes are leading your eye up and around sort of this circular motion. So I'm not only using shapes and lines to move your eye throughout the composition, but I'm also aware of the direction that my brush is going and how that's going to affect the way that your eye travels throughout the piece. I want to add a few more small trees in the distance here to create just a little bit more distance, because when you're layering up, for example, when you're painting woods in the trees, it can be helpful sometimes to paint the ones that are way off in the distance first, and then kind of work your way towards the foreground a little bit. This will help create a feeling of depth. And these little tiny thin dark brush strokes can also be little tiny trees right on the bank here in the foreground, or little twigs too. Some little stems that are left over from last summer's weeds and vegetation that grow along the creek here. And just like the big branches are casting shadows, some of these little branches, these little trees will cast smaller shadows, so we can go ahead and take our same brush now, this little small round brush, and use it to maybe draw some smaller shadows coming out here. Now I don't want my trees to be too dark there in the center of interest. I want to add a little bit of color to them in the middle. Just a little bit of this, that's a little bit too light, so it's going to be important that I don't get this too light. It has to be a dark color. I just want it to be a little lighter than the actual tree trunk here. So I'm using a nice dark green that's going to contrast nicely with this blue, and then I can, if I really want to draw some attention to that area, I can just pull out a little bit of this light pink, purple, maroon color here and just pop it in just in a few little places. And see, what we're getting is, because we're playing with a lot of cool colors in this piece, the reflection is looking very, very warm and inviting. So that's really this piece is all about, that little group of trees and the way the reflection leads up to it. And there's some of these little dark spots that are around the piece. I just want to, these are like little leaves or just little, what I call accents, which are just little dark spots that will help move your eye around the piece. And there are different places in the reference photo where I see these little dots, but I'm really just putting them where I want them in the picture, to help move your eye around the painting. And that's really at the heart of painting, is that we're not trying to copy what's in front of us. We're really designing with what we are presented with. We're taking Mother Nature and we're designing our picture from what's in front of us, but we're not necessarily trying to copy things. We're trying to create something new. You can see there that I'm using this just little touch. I'll just hold this brush at the end here and I can get a real tiny brush stroke that makes nice little branches there on that tree. And there's some little bits of snow here in these trees that are a little lighter, and I just want to pop that, little bits of that in there. Just creates a little interest to that area. Just want to do same thing here with some of this lighter bit of snow back here. And then we've got our, I want to change the shape just a little bit up here of this little bit of trees here. I want to break up some of this just a little. I want to pop some of the sky coming through in a couple little areas. But I don't want it to be too light again. I want to try to keep that control on how light or dark an area is. Making this nice purple. I'm going to add some of this purple, rose madder and ultramarine blue down to this corner. You got to add a little bit of white to these purples because they're so dark that you almost can't see the color unless you add just a little bit of white to it. And I want to bring out just a little bit more warmth to the sky right along the edge here. But I want to make sure I'm keeping this the right value too. So light and warm right by these trees. I don't take it all the way across, so I want it to get warmer and lighter right around the center of interest. Same thing with this reflection, so everything's leading our eye in towards these little trees. And I want to pay special attention to the area where these trees are growing out of the ground, because this is where a lot of the feeling of strength comes from in a tree, is how the tree flares out where it goes into the ground. So if I'm not careful, I'll forget to pay attention to that. But you can really create a nice feeling of a strong tree by paying attention to that little bit of drawing down there where the tree grabs a hold of the ground. And sometimes you can even exaggerate that a little bit. And so we're getting close now to a point where I'm going to call it finished, because you know, there's a large misconception with art that the longer you work on something, the better it is, but that's not necessarily the case. And I think a lot of beginners get that in their minds, and they feel like, oh, I need to finish this painting, and really a lot can be said for the spontaneity and energy that's preserved in a piece that is stopped at the right time. So there's really that nice sweet spot. I always said I'd much rather underwork a painting than overwork it, but what we should really be aiming for is that sweet spot where we still have a lot of the freshness of the initial lay-in, but we do take it to that level where we feel like we've added everything that we can add to it without confusing the message. A good way to gauge this is, I often say, when the should I's start replacing the why nots, it might be time to call it quits. And what I mean by that is, when we first start painting, a lot of times we're just laying in stuff and going real fast and not thinking too much about what we're up to. But then as we get closer to the finishing line, we start slowing down a little bit and start considering our moves a little bit more and thinking, do I want to do that? Do I want to do that? So a lot of times, you know, you can get to a point where adding more stuff to a painting is just really going to confuse the viewer and confuse the initial message. So you have to be aware of that. So I don't necessarily want to take this too much further. It's a good time to step back from your work and see how it looks at a distance. So you can step back across the studio, or if you're outside, you can step back about 10-15 feet and really see how the piece looks from that distance. See if there's anything that is standing out. So you can step back and see how the piece is working out from a distance. A lot of times, if there's something that's bothering you, it'll stand out better when you get back from the painting, from a little bit of a distance. And I love the feeling of this. It feels like the end of the day, and there's a chill in the air, and it's cold but beautiful. So I love the fact that we've got this nice contrast here, and that there's that nice light in the creek, and that we have these nice deep rich darks in the trees. I'm going to add just a little bit of cadmium red and ivory black to these trees and make a nice deep dark red color that's going to separate them just a little bit from all the cool around them. It'll also help pull them forward just a little bit and differentiate them from the background. And I want to get just a few of these little lines here that suggest these little stems. This location was off the road a little bit, and I had to climb down into some brush, and had a nice wild feeling to it. There's a couple little dark areas now. These are tricky because you don't want to get them too dark. They're out there in the middle of that light. They're little rocks and sticks that are laying in there, and I want to put them in, but I don't want to get them too dark. So I've got a nice purple here that's dark enough, and that just creates a little bit of surface interest on that water. I want to bring out just a little bit of light back here, using that peach color to show that the creek comes over there and then turns back and heads back this way into the picture. That might be a little bit too much, so I can come back right back into it. Yeah, just a suggestion is what we're looking for. And I want to create some variation back here in this distance, and then pull some of this area forward, but not too much. I keep it back there, but pull it just a little bit more forward by adding a little darker value there, and maybe over here. So you have to start relying on your intuition at this point. When we start off, there's a lot of concrete ideas that I'm after. Obviously this radiating line here that works with this center of interest, and I'm paying attention to laying in some big dark shapes. So those are all kind of logical and practical problems that I'm tackling. But there comes a point in a painting where you have to throw all your logic out the window and just trust your gut, and that's usually near the end of a painting. There's not an exact science to knowing when to, how to say a painting is finished. Like I said, I just keep pushing the lights and darks a little more until I feel like I'm getting this sensation that I'm looking for from the piece. I want to add a little bit more of this sunlit area up here, but again, I don't want to get it too light. Some little areas where the sky is poking through right here. Just little suggestions. But see, I can't use the sky color. I got to use a darker color because there's not. It's just coming through a small area. So when light comes through an area like that, the smaller the area, the darker the value. So don't think that you can just take your sky color and put it in right there. If you do that, what you're going to end up with is it'll look like paint sitting on top of the canvas. But if we get the right value, it'll start to look like you're looking through the trees to those areas off in the distance. A nice dark tree come up the side here. And I want a few delicate dark lines to again draw your eye into this area. So just a nice delicate touch here. You can draw a tree line, a little tree out there in front of those other trees, and then we can suggest the shadow or the reflection of it right down in here. Add some little warm tones in here, break up this shadowed color just a little bit more. And there's a nice, deep, bright, vibrant, it sounds like a contradiction, I know, deep, bright, and vibrant, right? What I mean is it's very saturated blue color that I see just popping throughout this piece. So I'm just going to mix up this nice blue and a good little bit of paint on the brush there, and just pop in some little areas near the center of interest specifically, because I don't want any real vibrant color too far away from the center of interest, or it's going to draw our eye out there. But just really along this creek bank, and your eye is going to jump from one spot of blue to the next. So again, using different ways that I have in different tools in my toolbox to guide your eye throughout the painting. And add sort of a brownish warm tone to this little tree right in here. I don't really like that, so I'm going to darken it back in. So don't be afraid to try something, and if you don't like it, just come back and fix it. It was a little bit too light, so that's good. I fixed that. Again, we'll have some more delicate lines coming out here. And these little delicate branches, they don't necessarily have to attach to a tree specifically. I mean, you want some to, but you can always just throw in some little lines up in the trees to suggest movement and to suggest these branches. And they don't necessarily have to relate to a very specific tree, as long as you have some that do relate to specific trees. Your eye will see those, and the viewer's eye will see those and understand what's going on, and then it'll make sense of the ones that aren't connected. It'll say, well, those are just branches, they must be connected to a tree somewhere. And so I'm getting really close now on this one. I'm really starting to take my time and look at the painting before I put the brush to it. That's another thing you'll notice. Things happen really quickly when you first start painting, but there should be more and more time between your brush strokes at this stage. It's good to put a brush stroke on, step back, see how it feels. Maybe put a few over on this side, and then you might need to put a couple over on the other side. And then you just get to a point where you start to feel like you don't know if you could add anything to it and really improve it. So I'm getting close to that point now. So I'm probably going to sign it. I've had a lot of fun doing this. I plan on doing more. I hope to have more frequent postings here on my YouTube channel. So I'm going to aim for about a video a week, whether it's a demo or just an art musing, or and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I know there are some questions on the older videos. I'm going to go back and try to answer a lot of those. I hadn't had a chance in a while. I've sort of been absent from YouTube for a little bit, but I'm excited to get back to it. Excited to have the opportunity again to demo for you, and to know that you guys are enjoying this and really using this information to go out and try painting your own pieces. So that means a lot to me, and I appreciate hearing from everybody. This piece is available for purchase on my website, which is linked in the description below. And if you vote it on Facebook, you get a 15% discount. So if you're purchasing and you did vote, be sure to let me know so I can give you that discount. And also, if you want to support the channel, my Patreon page is linked in the description below. You can get on there and become a patron of the page. I appreciate everybody's continued support. If you want to, just hit a thumbs up on this video. You can hit subscribe and click the bell for notifications if you're not subscribed already, to keep up with my work. And one of my biggest pieces of advice for everybody is to get out there and have fun. You know, when you first start painting, you shouldn't be under a lot of pressure to turn out masterpieces. There's a learning curve to this thing, and the more difficult something is, the more time it takes to get over that learning curve. And painting is something that it really can't be rushed, and there's no way to sidestep the work that you put in the beginning. So get out there and have fun and push paint around and enjoy what you're doing. And when you get done, go paint another one. Paint things that you love. That's why I always tell my art students in my painting class that I'm teaching now is make sure that when you're painting something that you have a reason for painting it. So pay attention to things that get you excited, or that you just really think are beautiful, and paint those things. That's what art should be about. It's about painting, but it's also a little bit about self-discovery and about learning how to pick out the moments throughout the day that are special, and the more we pick out these moments, the more we realize that it's pretty much every moment in every day is special, and we develop our intuition and our vision so that we can really see these moments as they pass us by, and hopefully work a little magic and capture them on canvas. So again, thanks so much for everybody tuning in and watching this. And I'll see you at my next video. Have fun and happy painting.